Welcome back to the Impact Driven Leader Podcast. This is your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. If you're watching on YouTube, hey, what's up? If you're listening, wherever you're listening to your podcast, man, glad you're here listening. And today I have an absolute treat. If you've listened to many episodes, hopefully you have. A great joy that I have is when I come across a new author, a new leader, someone new to me, and I read their book, I listen to them, I get to learn about them, and I'm like, man, we have layered in this learning from two different places. To me, it makes it a lot of fun. And today I have that opportunity to speak with Faisal Hoque. Faisal is an entrepreneur. He's worked with GE. He started several of his own companies. He's a tech giant. He's been featured everywhere. Does a lot of different work. Multiple book author. He has Lift, has Everything Connects. His latest book is Lift, coming out right now. And I'm excited to have this conversation because we dig deep into the difference between transformational, transactional leadership, where transactional leadership kind of, has fit into the landscape in our world. And really this post-pandemic, this idea of our world has changed. And we have this conversation with kind of a tech background, but yet this ethereal, you got to do the work. You got to get your hands dirty. And really a leader's greatest opportunity is to be a gardener. You're going to hear more about that in this conversation with Faisal Hoque. Can't wait for you to listen in. What an enjoyable time I had with this gentleman, and glad to call him a new friend, and can't wait to meet up with him, get together with him, and have more of this conversation later. So take some notes, get ready for this one. Faisal, thank you so much for joining me today. Man, I'm excited to talk to you. One, as I've learned about you and I've learned about your involvement, tech industry and all your entrepreneurship, everything you've done, that's one thing. But then I also know that, this leadership stuff that you've dug into and, writing this book, the latest book, Lift, and all the other content that you have. I'm excited to talk to you today about leadership, to talk to you about kind of some of the tools. And one of the things you just shared is this latest book, Lift, that, as I shared who the audience of this podcast is, one of the things you talked about is writing for your son. So I'd love for you to just kind of kick off and, start there from the perspective of, writing this book and, speaking to an audience, a newer generation, a younger generation. What really drove you to, bring all the pieces and parts together? Sure.
Let me back up a little bit. I wrote Everything Connects, which was my last book, about 7 years ago. And then I kind of stopped writing, and that book is about mindfulness, creativity, innovation. And I stopped writing partly because I got deeply involved trying to help our government agencies with their transformation and technological changes and efficiency and cost savings, that sort of things. And so, last year, when beginning of last year, or maybe end of 2020, my publicist and publishers said it's time to do another book because, we have pandemic, we have global unrest of all kind, lots of misinformation, political unrest, climate change, and technology has completely changed the field. It was already changing, but the way we work, the way we communicate, because of pandemic, it took us to the next height. So I was, I said, it's a lot of commitment to write a book. I don't know whether I have the time. And, and my son just went to college, freshman at that time. And I kind of on the fence. And then what happened, I started thinking about it, and I found out that my son has multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer. So he had to come home from college, just shortening the story. And, my good friend Lori and my publicist, she said, you have to write it because you told me the same thing when her son had a brain tumor and brain cancer a while back. And that was many years ago. He's now 26, doing well. And so I kind of shifted my head. I said, I have to do this because, with all, with midst of all global crisis, there's always some personal crisis that every one of us go through. Whatever that is, family, career, finance, mental health, physical health, whatever. So I kind of like dove into this full blown, and I said, I'm gonna write it from the point of global context, but the undercurrent is going to be how am I coping with it, and also can I have something, it's something for my son's generation where they can look at it as what were they going through, because many of them have been going through college, maybe their first job, maybe their second job, some mid-career younger generation who's trying to motivate their team, but who are completely out of touch because of they're not having the physical connection. So a lot of those factors kind of, drove the ideas behind it, and I kind of categorized it in these 4 drivers. The pandemic, and if you look at pandemic, not just staying home, a lot of people lost their family members, all kind of stuff. I had my mother in nursing home. I couldn't visit her. My wife was the same thing. So that, then we saw this global shift, the massive global shift in mood and misinformation. Doesn't matter which side of the political camp you were in. You saw the technologically starting working differently. And then the climate change, those kind of the 4 drivers. And I said, okay, well, if I had to look at that, what should we do? And I said, well, first thing you have to do is really develop a acute sense of empathy, because you have to be able to relate to others in order to kind of, see where you are and how you can relate to them. And then, leadership is a funny word, because, nothing happens with leadership if you can't execute it, right? So you need some sort of a systemic pattern to make things happen. So that's where system thinking came in. And then the last piece of it, that you have to kind of learn from experience. You can read books, you can go to school, but nothing like doing it, right? So I mean, you said you were into farming and whatnot. I'm into cooking, and my neighbor has a big farm. We're big farm, meaning at a hobby farm, right? So I mean, you learn from doing things. You have to get your hands dirty, Otherwise, you can't really learn. So that experiential learning is critical. So those are kind of the backdrop of what was going on in my head. And then, obviously I had a lot of help from a whole variety of people, my research team and others, and we were able to dive into it pretty quickly. And it came together quite nicely within 6-7 months. And I can't believe that, this one, May is when my son got diagnosed, and he's doing well now, but now it's just about a year and we have the book out, and I didn't think I could pull it off. But you never know what you can do till your kind of back is against the wall and you find a new way of doing things.
Well, I mean, people are motivated by 2 things: desperation and inspiration. And,
that's right.
I think you encompass that. And I shared this earlier in preparation. I've got to spend the day with you before we ever, got onto this and see your face. And one of the things that I kind of want to, you layered in something there that I really love, is this idea of being able to speak to your son. And as I look at it as, this generation of leadership, and now we're in the midst of financial turmoil. It's what is our economy going to do? We're recording this the beginning of June 2022, and we can already see things that are going to happen. And I look at that from the perspective of yourself. I experienced the 08, 09, 07, time frame where you were obviously deep into that as well. Yeah. And as I find myself in conversation having with people, it's like, well, this is what I learned. And there's a part of me that reading through this book, there was a change in your life at some point where you learned, to give it a backdrop, the importance, the imperativeness, the being better of transformational leadership as opposed to transactional leadership. You talk about that a lot in the book, and I'd love to know, where did that come from for you?
So as I shared with you, I'm in the tech industry. My main line of business is building cutting edge technology for business improvement, and that's kind of what I've done ever since I was maybe 19, 20. And I have 19 years or 20 years old. So, and I've gone through a series of classic entrepreneurship where you build a product, you raise a lot of money, from VCs, you run hot, fast and crash even faster and get fired from your own company because you're not getting along with your investors and whatnot. So I've gone through all that, right? So as time went by, I found, that running fast and building things for yourself or for ego is something different when you're young versus if you're fortunate enough to discover what really makes you happy at a later stage of your life. So and I've gone through this transformative growth myself compared to when I was 24, then in my mid 30s, and in my mid 40s. Now I'm in my 50s, early 50s. So I've gone through those stages, and I was very fortunate to be able to work with a wide variety of people from all part of the world and a wide variety of industry with different motivation. Like people who are in public sector, they have a different calling than people who are in private sector. People who are overseas, maybe not in the U.S. Trying to do stuff like in social entrepreneurship stuff. Those are very different kind of mindset, but there is a common theme. The common theme is that you cannot make any impact if you cannot relate to other people, right? So and that's very that's very personal and emotional, right? And the more you can relate to people, it actually gives you an empowerment to kind of elevate yourself from where you are and kind of try to do stuff for other people. And by the way, there's nothing more gratifying, and you don't learn this when you're young, you learn it as you grow older. I mean, there's nothing more gratifying than trying to do something for other people. It makes you feel good. That's actually why I figured out about myself that one of the reasons I love to cook is because, when you feed people, it makes them happy, right? So that's kind of, it's very simple and very rudimentary, but that actually can translate to anything you can do. So when you're writing something, you want to write from your own experience and share your knowledge, but you hope that it will actually do something for somebody, right? Or if you build a product, you want to build a product that may have an impact for other people. So it changes your perspective, I think, as you go through various phases of your life and you learn, and you build confidence by saying, there are things that we absolutely cannot control. I mean, a lot of the things that we're talking about, and even the looming, financial, I wouldn't call it disaster yet, but the down cycle that we're noticing, or the war, whatever the case may be. I mean, as long as you keep building your own skill set and you try to put yourself as collective us versus just yourself, I think things are going to be okay. By nature, I'm an optimistic person. And despite my, professional, personal, career, whatever disaster I have had, I don't think I have, I have kind of followed that principle, and it kind of served me well. And I increasingly surprise myself how much I can take in terms of adversity, and because there's nothing like dealing with your child's life-threatening illness and just hunker down and say, well, I have a thriving career, but I want to do more. And actually, as one of the reasons I wrote this book and I set up a new organization, because all the proceeds is going to go to cancer research. So since I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical scientist, I know how to write, I know how to build a product. So my immediate thinking was, okay, let me do something that's going to generate some revenue, but I can take that revenue and give it to people who can do something with it for people who may be suffering from that kind of. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the genesis of leadership action can come from many things. It can come from adversity, just like you said. It can also come from other inspiration. It can come from whatever, and your motivation may be different, but your opportunity to make impact is enormous, in whatever thing that you can. It just takes a different mindset and different way of looking at it.
One of the keys that you write about, and I mentioned earlier, that was probably the word that drew me into Lyft, was empathy. And what I find is it's really it's probably one of two words in business acumen that I find most misdefined or misunderstood. Humility is one, where people are still have a hard time figuring that out, and empathy is number two. And so I love to ask someone, especially like yourself, who's so ingrained as empathy is the solution. How do you define empathy?
So, empathy has many definitions, right? And different people define empathy differently. The way I look at empathy is the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoe, at least to be able to relate what they may be going through. So the reality is that, each person goes through different things, and each person feels it differently, acts differently, does things differently. So you're never going to be in their shoe, but you absolutely can develop that emotional awareness, and it's kind of, I touch upon this a little bit in my previous book called Everything Connects, and the second edition, by the way, is coming out later in the year, which I kind of bulked it up. There's a whole edition on mindfulness, because empathy and mindfulness kind of goes hand in hand, because you have to be mindful of your action and mindful of your surrounding. What that means is that you have to really tune to somebody else's feeling, and it's not, and be able to try to put yourself in the similar situation, right? So, like, for example, pain is pain, right? So, for example, if you say, look, well, I can relate to you because you may have a broken leg, but I know what a pain is because maybe I have a broken arm. We're not really having the same thing, but you understand the pain, right? So that's the way to relate, empathy. And actually, if you look at it, one of the greatest learning, perhaps, from the pandemic was that the entire world was going through one type of crisis together. So it actually made people more empathetic, and they say, oh, they can't go out, so I guess I cannot go out either. So they must be in the same boat. They can't visit their grandparents or their elderly parents because they're somewhere else. So I can't do that either, right? So it was kind of a great lesson in forced way of trying to relate to somebody else's situation. What that allows you to do is that then you can start thinking of others first than yourself, right? So it actually takes a certain level of discipline to practice empathy, especially when you're talking about work environment and leadership environment, because everybody is not our family. We can feel a family member's pain, but it's harder to feel a total stranger's pain or a co-worker's pain, right? So, but you have to have a conscious practice of empathy that allows you to say, okay, well, maybe I should not be as hard on that person. Maybe they're going through something. So, for example, I have a lot of colleagues all over the place, all over the world, different time zones and different background and different expertise, and different age group, by the way. I have a bunch of young developers, and then I have, my colleagues in my government work that I do. They're at a different age group, But each one of them is going through different things, and you kind of have to, you have to kind of stop yourself and let them express and build that personal connection, and that actually will allow you to motivate people much better and faster than say, why didn't you come to work at 10 o'clock yesterday? What happened? Immediately that puts in the, rather than saying, are you okay? Something went wrong or something, or do you need a break? This simple gesture of kindness, allows us to connect. And I wasn't that way when I was in mid-20s, because I was very driven. I was very demanding, to a certain extent, probably very arrogant, and because I know it all. You don't, when you're young, you actually don't know how. you kind of don't realize how little you know, right? But as you develop your skills and as you develop your go through different stages, some of these things gets better, but you have to have a conscious practice and discipline to kind of know, to get to that fine tuning, and without that, nothing happens.
So you kind of, you've talked about in the book, you talked about it just there, that style of leadership that you had, which was very transactional. It's very, what are you going to do for me today? And if you're not, then I have no use for you, right? That's kind of that ideology. You had that. You shared that. I've experienced that. I've gone through that myself. Why do you find that a generation of leaders have that style of leadership? What do you think drives that?
Well, because you have to look at where does it come from, right? So if you look at if you look at high performance people, right? And often enough they're the one who becomes leaders, right? Because they're high performers and they know they're natural born leaders, right? So for a high performer and natural born leader, it's very difficult to understand that not everybody acts the same way and does things the same way, even though each one of them has enormous talent and opportunity to contribute, right? So it starts from there, and then you pick up any management book, right? These words that we are finally beginning to use now, like empathy and mindfulness and emotional intelligence. These are not the words you saw in 70s and 80s and even in 90s. Pick up any management books and they will say, okay, here's the 5 pillars of success. Put together a project plan, put together a milestone, and you track people by the milestone. So there's that aspect of it, and there is the other aspect of it that we are short-term outcome-driven society, right? So if we have one bad quarter, then the life is over, right? And it's proven. I don't know whether you see this. There's a new book. I'm not remembering the name. It criticizes Jack Welch of his management practice because he was very much. And I was in Jack's GE when I started my career, and he was very much about A players, B players, and C players, and very much a transactional type of a leadership style where you would manage things quarterly and you grow through financial acquisition. And if you look at what has happened, they stopped innovating. Creative people left. They stopped innovating, and it has become a yesterday's company, right? And the ripple effect of that happened long time after Jack, retired from GE. And if you look at now, compare that to a lot of these new generation companies who are looking at things. Okay, I've got this massive problem to solve. I know we're not going to make money, but we're going to somehow survive, and we're going to get to it, and we're going to focus on extracting the creativity of our people, and then create something that is for long term and not for the next quarter. That impact is far more meaningful, right? And if we don't get there, and we kind of learned this in several cycles now, right? So you talked about '08, and look at what has happened in the last 5 years. It seems like the faster we try to run and faster we want to leave behind, quote unquote, people who are not meeting the milestones, the farther we are falling behind. There's a reason for that, right? Because everybody doesn't learn the same way. Everybody doesn't contribute that same way. Everybody doesn't measure success the same way. So the trick is looking at people and hone into their learning style and their creativity and their ability to make impact. And that's the biggest challenge and role of a leader, to extract and make the people who will make not only impactful contribution, but they will surprise you. But you have to even nurture them, right? And that nurturing takes a lot more harder work than just looking at a spreadsheet and a Gantt milestone, right? So
it's such this confluence of so many different things. You touch on Jack Welch, and I want to get there for a moment because I think I read that same book, and I can't remember the title of it. I don't know if it's about the secession plan of Jeff Immelt is the book that I read, and that change. But one of the things that I found is understanding that everyone has value. And I wrote this down in this thought that when I was going through Lyft, and I want to grab it here quick, because one of the things that I understood, and you pointed out, is when you accept that everyone is different, and other people have strengths that you don't have, and your ability to really foster that, it doesn't make you weaker. It makes you stronger. Instead, you're weak when you try to bring everyone into an organization that has the same strengths as you. I think it's, you made a point here, the implementing of your transformational leadership, and it's be aware of your weaknesses and be okay with that through the self-awareness process. And to me, that's so imperative. And I think go ahead.
No, I mean, you're right on. I mean, look, I didn't write Live by myself. I had two contributing authors and researcher. I have a whole, if I really count all the people that I recruited just to do this Live project, I think there's about 25, 30 people from different type of background and expertise, and there's a whole publishing team. So any kind of creative output that has any kind of substance and even any chance to resonate with other people and quote unquote lift them up, you need to be able to tap into different people with different skill set, right? And different people with different skill set is going to have different personality. They're going to have a different way of working. Their biorhythm is going to be different. Some people like to work early in the morning. Some people works at night better. A wide variety of personality and skill set and work style that has to be meshed together to do something. So none of these is a solo project. If you want to make any impact, everything is output of major collaboration, right? So the collaboration, and who do you want to collaborate? You don't want to collaborate with people who exactly does the same thing and same way, same personality. Yeah. It won't work. You have to collaborate with people that adding something to the pot, right? So it's like making a pot of gumbo, right? Get different ingredients and then it becomes a gumbo, right? But the challenge is that, we talk about, organizational psychology and organizational culture is big topics these days, right? So, and you say, okay, well, what should be our culture, and is the leader who sets the culture? I would argue that it's the people who sets the culture. It's the collective people's input that sets up the culture. And so you can have some common things that that you have to be disciplined, but your definition of discipline may not be the same as somebody else's discipline. Discipline may, one person's discipline may be that I work best at 12 o'clock at night, but discipline may be that person goes to work 12 o'clock at night every night, right? And my discipline may be like I'm an early riser, so I get up at 4:30, 5:30. That's my discipline. But I cannot say that other person is not disciplined because that person works at 12:30 at night. So I don't really care what your way of working, as long as you have a basic ethics and a respect for some other people, and you want to incorporate other people's thought process, and you have a quote unquote self-discipline to execute something. That's what creates the framework of a culture and execution of collaboration. And then let's face it, you talked about this generation. I mean, I've always been this way in the sense that I think, when you want to do innovative project, it's never the case that you're working with not the same kind of people, but not even in the same organization. So if you just look at Lyft, I'm literally working with like 4 or 5 different companies and different organizations that are doing different things. Like we just developed a whole coursework that's a very documentary style coursework, which was done by a different team. The design team is different. The PR team is different. The people who were handling the e-commerce are different. So these are different organizations. So you really, as a leader, it's your role to be able to pull these together and kind of adapt yourself to their work style versus asking them to adapt to your work style, because that you will never be able to extract the best out of creative people if you're asking them to adapt to your work style. Yeah. So the leadership's role is really as an enabler. So if I'm just using Lyft as an example, I think the reason it came together so quickly in the midst of my own personal crisis is because I was able to kind of hone into that, and I trusted the process, and I trusted that the people who are working at a various portion of this project, they will do their utmost and will end up with something meaningful. And so I'm not, and I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah,
but
well,
anything.
I think you tap on a couple different factors there. The values, to me, as you said, a leader doesn't make the culture. A leader kind of either steers it one direction or other, saying, hey, we're going to embrace more of that, or we're not going to. It's kind of that corrective measure, steer away from the guardrails. But that's all based upon the values of the people. And to me, you talk about this collaborative community. I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that I can bring my uniqueness, but that it's valued. And I know if I bring that to the table and you bring your perspective to the table, man, we're going to come up with something much better than what either one of us could individually because of our differences. But yet we've already established, I talked to you about this before, I value so much your perspective because it's similar from a value point of view. But man, we're totally different, spectrums of our experience.
Of course, we obviously there has been a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion and all that stuff, and we mostly focus on diversity or inclusion when it comes to, let's say, race, religion, or sex or gender, but I think that if you can move it up one level up and say, okay, diversity and inclusion comes from really honoring other people's talent that they bring to the table, it gives you a whole different perspective, because then you are not saying, well, I have to have an Asian team member or a African team member or this team member or that team member. It's really the different perspective that you're trying to incorporate, right? So I think that's very important. And you talk about value. I mean, that's the philosophical and almost like the spiritual tenet of a leader that kind of holds it together. That's the glue that makes things together, right? So many ways, a successful leader is a spiritual and a philosophical leader who knows how to create the proper infrastructure by taking other people's experiential learning and infuse it into whatever they're trying to accomplish. And that's when the magic happens. And I'm very fortunate that I have been able to experience that multiple times, because each time I do one of these projects, I obviously think from a building a business point of view, but I look at each one of these uniquely projects that I take on every couple of years. And I look at them that, it's like making a movie. You make one movie with a bunch of people, and then you make the next movie, and maybe you'll work with some of the people next time or not. But it's that same basic principle that you apply. And it's very rewarding. I mean, it's super rewarding and creative and rejuvenating. I mean, it allows you to reinvent yourself.
So taking that, what you just said, and this idea of kind of this gardening style leader, right? You know, a gardening style leader is like, well, this plant needs that. I just need to make sure the soil is fertile and everything's there so the plants can grow. And at times that means, oh, I have to use different skills. Maybe I'm not good at adding fertilizer. I need to add water. And knowing that, to me, those are the soft skills. And
Yes,
I mentioned to you that I want to kind of dig into the Jack Welch, because I think there's a imperative thing that I believe was missed. And I believe as I was the, kind of one that, Welchian leadership style, this hard, aggressive, it is extremely competitive. But one of the things that I missed, and I think many people did because they celebrated that extreme competitiveness.
Yeah.
But yet as I read more and I discovered more and I saw it after the fact, the actual empathy and soft skill that he had, the stories of when he would go to actual plants and spend time with the people working there, that wasn't discussed in what he was great at as far as his style of leadership. But to me, those were the skills that allowed those other things to actually be effective.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, you're right. I mean, it's a gardening style of leadership that makes things, especially if you look at this newer generation. And we talked about this extensively because the newer generation, or not just from an age point of view, it's from anybody. I mean, they're far more empowered, right? You don't have to work for GE. You don't have to work for Microsoft. You can take a laptop and sit in your dining room table and work, right? So we're far more empowered than we ever were in the past. So what that created now is that we have more options. Those kind of leadership style wouldn't attract the best people anyway, right? Because we all have different options. And it doesn't matter whether you're sitting here in Stamford, Connecticut, or like myself, my colleagues who are sitting in let's say somewhere in Italy or somewhere in India or wherever, it doesn't matter. I mean, you have the same access and you're far more empowered than ever. So right there, it actually have flattened that hostage mentality that you will perform, otherwise you'll be gone. And now the answer would be, great, you don't have to fire me. I'm resigning, right? So that's why this whole conversation about the Great Resignation has trending, because it's like you have option, and there's many factors to that, but that's one of the reasons is that you have options. So that kind of hard edge leadership would not allow you to bring in the best talent anyway. So that's number one. Number two is that winning at all cost, winning by demolishing other people along the way. It absolutely does not work. We win when we all win, and it's not that we have to have the same reward. Reward should be based on your contribution, but we don't have to win at all costs, and we don't have to win by putting other people down. That has been in our culture very much so in, let's say 80s and 90s and even 2000, right? And it doesn't work. And the younger generation wouldn't at all go for it, because they even look at it this way, right? I mean, these factor that if you didn't go to right school and if you were not born in the right family, you couldn't do anything. That's absolutely not true. And our entrepreneurship culture, especially here in the U.S., has proven them time and time again. I'm a college dropout. I didn't go to any Ivy League school. Here, I've got deeply involved in academia, and which I never planned, in my wildest imagination. But anything is possible, right? That's because you can learn. It comes from the ability to learn and ability to exercise your talent from anywhere and everywhere. So if you are that kind of hard-edged leader, you're not going to attract those people. They're going to go somewhere else, right? And so right there is a motivation for a leader, especially if you're a business leader and you are that kind of that hardest competitive leader, to change your leadership behavior, because you're not gonna, it's not gonna work. I mean, we have proven that, and now more than ever, especially last 3 years, we have proven that it's a world is a far different place than it was before. Emotionally, technologically, systemically, everything has changed. And it won't work. It's just different place.
And it's woe to the leader that, is sitting there saying, let's get back to normal. Let's get back to what it was, in 2019. Let's get back to, we were doing so well back then. Then we had this pandemic we had to deal through, and let's get everyone back in the office and let's just get back to normal. And the oversight, the absolute miss is we're never going to. It's right. for good and bad. I mean, bad because of, obviously, you talk about the health challenges, the impact on our society, but for good because we've realized there's a better way.
Yeah, and by the way, so extremism is never good, right? So in the sense that when pendulum swings in one direction, there's an impact. So there's this very ancient Eastern saying where he says that if you have your string tuned so hard it stops making music or it breaks, right? So it's a really notion of balance. I mean, you can't have people just be at home all the time, because you lose that social connection, right? So, and totally. Especially for the younger generation, I mean, they need to be part of a physical team from time to time to learn collaboratively, right? So you need that human interaction, right? You couldn't sit on Zoom calls or team calls or whatever anybody's using 7x24 and work. You have to have that human connection. Nor it is necessary to be at an office desk in your cubicle every day, 8 hours a day. I mean, that doesn't make people productive either, right? So there's a fine balance. And funny you're saying this because, I just, a Fast Company just ran one of my article today on this very topic about where I touched upon the fact that, just because you're remote doesn't mean you have to lose that human connection, nor you have to go other extreme where you have to have everybody in the office every day, and that's the formula for more productivity and creativity. It doesn't work either. So you have to have that balance. I mean, it's not about free food and foosball and staying there 7x24 and living your we've gone through that phase too, right? I mean, every Silicon Valley company had free food and ping pong table, and thought that would be the great calling for productivity because everybody is going to be at their 7x24. I mean, that's like being at home, stuck in a room for 7x24. You need to see, you have to connect with outside in order to, extract what's inside, and you can't do that if there is not that balance. You need that. We use this word called intentionally omnivorous, not in Lyft, but in Everything Connects. Yeah. And it kind of carries over. It's the idea of that you have to experience, many facets of the global society and global learning. Only then you can be productive and creative. It doesn't come from isolation.
You talk about this in Lyft, this experiential learning. How do you figure out how to lead? You have to go, be in that spot. There's a additional to that I've learned, and to me, it's called layered learning. So it's taking that experience, but then coming in and having discussions with others like, well, what's working, not working, and within a capacity of your leadership community, it's like, hey, help me understand, where am I missing the mark? Where am I not meeting the needs that you have as a team? Where can we collaborate better? I think having that ability to be vulnerable enough and humble enough to say, I'm just trying to figure this out. My job is to help you achieve, our grand vision. That's my responsibility and role. And my responsibility and role is to you as the performer, but we're all performing together. How can we get there? To me, as I gather that from everything you've written and what you've talked about, when a leader can embrace that, man, it not only frees them, but it frees everyone else.
Absolutely. Leadership can be a burden, right? It can be a very big burden. But, more and more, you talk about being vulnerable. I found myself, especially last 1 year, because, midst of going through my son's treatment and doing this book, plus I have, two running organizations that I'm dealing with, where I'm leading, and I often found myself telling my team members that, guys, I need a break. I can't deal with this.
Yeah.
And I think it was refreshing to them to see that, and it motivated them even more, because it said,
totally,
if this guy can do this, why wouldn't we do this, right? So
yeah.
It's important to be able to relate with other people by opening yourself up, and it's not a weakness to say you can't do something, and maybe somebody else can do it better, and
totally.
As a leader, it's your job to uplift that person, extract that person's and put them on the pedestal when they deserve to be put on the pedestal, and that's how you create great projects. There's not a single piece of music that I wouldn't say never, but more. 9 out of 10 times, every piece of music is a music created by a collection of people, right?
Yeah.
Which is extremely a creative process, right? So. Same with building a software platform, or putting together a great meal, or building a farm, whatever the case may be, or building a community. These are very much of the ability to bring people together for a cause and executing it from that point of view.
So to kind of wrap up here, one of the things I'm really intrigued is, as you know, you're invested so much in this technological transformation of organizations for the best. What do you see that's going to be a big stretch for a lot of current leaders the next few years?
I think it's manifold, and because things are increasingly very, very complex, right? So for example, the people who knows soft skills, and people who knows the various things that we just talked about, they are often not very in tune with technological fast pace that has happened in the global society, right? And so there's a disconnect. And then the people who knows deep technology, they often have the inability to exercise all these things we are talking about and bringing people together, right? And so and then there is the last piece of it is that constantly telling yourself, I need to learn something new, and I have to have this notion of beginner's mind, where I have to learn something new because I don't know what I knew tomorrow doesn't really work today. That renewal and reinvention process is not always there. And each of these things that we just talked about, you can spend a lifetime just studying empathy, or a lifetime just studying, system thinking, or lifetime thinking, studying a reinvention process, or a particular tenet of technology, like, for example, cybersecurity, or whatever, right? Data science, right? So, which is really my field, but you could spend a lifetime thinking and doing those sort of things. The trick is, that you're not going to be able to learn all that, right? So trick is that, can you learn how to tap into people who are best into each of those areas, and constantly nurturing them and learn from them, but also trying to take their output and make something out of them as a total impact on a particular project or a particular organization or a particular community, and gets larger and larger on the country and then on a globe, right? I mean, look, I mean, one of the reasons we have created this fragmented society as a globe is because we have been living in very silos, right? Organization lives in silos, community lives in silos, countries lives in silos, and we kind of forgotten, even though we know we are an interconnected society. If nothing else, pandemic showed that to us. I mean, an outbreak in one place immediately impacts the entire globe, right? So, I mean, we kind of forgotten that. That was a wake-up call to show that you can't live in silos. So, and the next generation leaders are going to be best if they have that mindset that I'm not going to know everything. I don't need to know everything. I just need to know how to tap into people who knows those things that I need to tap into and make something out of it. You're really a conductor. A leader is a conductor.
Yeah.
A leader is not the drummer or the guitarist or the celloist. You have to be the conductor. But you may choose that you don't want to be a conductor. That's okay too.
Yeah, well, and that I think is it comes back to what you said earlier, not to belabor this, but it's how a lot of people have ended up in leadership as they were high performers. And I think we need to re-identify what does a great collaborator is the person that needs to be leading, not the highest performer, the individual performer, because those two skills do not enhance an organization's growth. And I believe this, and kind of reading through this stuff, you have this idea of embracing the digital transformation. I think if you do that, and you do that in a sense to meet the internal and external customers, all those involved, man, that's where things are actually going to improve. But yet, instead of being afraid that we're going to lose human connection, no, just understand, model that through the improvements. How can we enhance our connections? How can we make it easier for me to serve customers, both internal, external? I believe that's what you're really professing, and I love it, because to me, that's what's going to allow organizations to really strive and thrive going forward.
Absolutely, and it applies in every industry. By the way, it's not just business. I mean, look at look at
every
how
industry.
How we treat patients and try to take care of people who are sick, right? I mean, so the healthcare. Look at how we're trying. How the government needs to serve the citizens. Like look at how the educational system needs to change, because the learning pattern has changed and the materials are not the same. The creative people doesn't learn the same way as people who are very much focused on structural learning, right? So these are missed opportunities if we are not in tune to all the things we talked about, right? And it is not just about building a better business. It's really about building an impactful society. And it doesn't matter where your station in life is, you can practice this and you can make an impact, and you should, because it's fulfilling. I mean, it's truly fulfilling when you get to tap into that. And it doesn't have to be just about financial success. Of course, we need financial success, because that allows us to be opportunistic to do all kind of other things. But it is not about building a better business for financial success, because that's not often successful, often impactful. Totally. And by the way, that's not often even long-lasting. If you do a case study on GE, that's perhaps one of the biggest learning, because Jack's GE was all about financial performance, yet they, at the end, didn't really sustain the innovation that they were preaching and striving.
Yeah. Faisal, thank you so much. This has been great. I could go on for hours. I want to be respectful of your time, and I'd rather queue it up for another time for us to sit down and maybe have a gumbo. If I make it to Connecticut, would love to. Great. Thank you again for all your time.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
There were two moments in that conversation with Faisal that I really just like, oh man. And one of them when he talked about how through the process of writing the book Lift and working with his different companies, that he had to take a moment to say, hey guys, I can't do all this. And I think that amount of vulnerability, and I didn't get to say this to him, but I wish I would have. It's like, a younger Faisal might have said, oh, I got this all figured out. And gruffly and abruptly just, push through or push people away so he could go and deal and not say, hey, I need help. I don't have the capacity in this today. And I think that learning, that maturity that he shared, that he had to learn from when he was 24 and an early executive when he got fired from his company by the investors, to who he is now in his 50s. A man that has, learned a better way, as he talked about this idea of cooking and putting all the special ingredients together. If you've listened to the last several episodes that have been featured here on the Impact Driven Leader podcast, we've had those conversations coming from different guests, and I didn't intend that. It just happened to be that came through conversation. And that came through conversation because it's that meaningful. A leader's greatest opportunity is to be a collaborator. Faisal talks about in his book, Lift, the difference between a cooperator and a collaborator. And I really like it. A collaborator helps everyone get better. They use the different resources and abilities of everyone to perform at a higher capacity. A cooperator just gets along. They just say, let's get through this. I don't, maybe the easiest way for me to cooperate is just disengage. I'll go do my own thing. That's not collaboration. That doesn't make organizations great. As a leader, as a performer, you have the opportunity to do something better, to be a transformational leader if you choose to collaborate. It's not about what you bring to the party. It's not about, how do you protect yours? It's saying, hey, I have a bigger vision and I need your help. And if we do this together, man, I know we can do something really special. And being willing to say, it's not about my individual performance. It's what little bit I can bring and what you can bring. Man, that's what's going to make a total difference. I learned about this leadership in network marketing. It's this volunteer army of how do we accomplish something greater? I'm thankful for that. It helped me grow as a person. And I'm thankful to have conversations with Faisal so that way I can share with you too. I'd love to do this. And I talked about it in this interview, layered learning. That's something I believe in tremendously. The experiential learning, as he talked about, but also that layered learning. That's what happens in our roundtable. I'd love to invite you to be a part of that roundtable where we go through a book. We don't go, line by line through the book, chapter through chapter, but we use it as a prompt to have real life world conversations just like Faisal was talking about. And that's how you learn to be a transformational leader, with the desire to transform others' lives through your capacity to collaborate. And I know you need a group to do that. That's what I've learned. Faisal kind of talked a little bit about it too. And I'd love to invite you to be a part of the Impact Driven Leader Roundtable. If you've gotten value out of these episodes, I'd love to talk to you about that and see if you could join and be a part of our community. Otherwise, man, thanks for listening in. I'd love for you to share this with someone. If you're not a subscriber on YouTube or listening, love for you to subscribe. Make sure you get notified every Friday whenever a new episode comes out. You can also subscribe to my newsletter that comes out on Friday, introducing each podcast episode. And then there's also 2 blogs that get launched on my website Monday and Wednesday every week, where you can learn a little bit what I'm learning about too. So there's all the process of learning, as he talked about. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for being a listener and a viewer. Till next time, have a good one.